Why are you parked here this late? What are you doing tonight?
We stopped for coffee, officer. Just heading home.
Red and blue lights cut silently through the heavy midnight fog, turning an ordinary coffee run into a precarious standoff where one wrong word could cost a man his life. It is the kind of quiet, dangerous escalation that doesn't begin with a drawn weapon or a shouting match, but with a simple, loaded assumption made in the dark. The air in the parking lot of the Oasis convenience store is thick with the smell of old asphalt, ozone, and the faint, bitter scent of burnt coffee. It is 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday in a transitional suburb just outside of Baltimore. The glowing neon sign above the store buzzes with a relentless mechanical hum, its flickering red S's casting long, distorted shadows across the wet pavement. Inside a black Ford Explorer sit two men, utterly exhausted from a 14-hour day. Marcus Reed, a 34-year-old structural engineer, rests his hands on the steering wheel. His knuckles are pale, his cuticles dry and dusted with the pale gray residue of Portland cement from a municipal bridge foundation. Pour beside him in the passenger seat is Elias Thorne, a 35-year-old architect whose wire-rimmed glasses keep slipping down the bridge of his nose. Elias is nursing a lukewarm paper cup of black coffee, staring blankly at the digital clock on the dashboard. They are not looking for trouble. They are just trying to find the energy to drive the remaining 20 miles home. Without warning, the blinding beam of a halogen spotlight floods the interior of the SUV, instantly obliterating their night vision. The light is so intense that Marcus instinctively throws a hand up to shield his eyes, a natural human reaction that, in a different context, he might be written into a police report as a defensive or evasive movement behind the spotlight. A dark patrol cruiser has positioned itself diagonally across the rear of Marcus's vehicle. The cruiser's position is deliberate. It completely blocks the Explorer from backing out in the eyes of the law. The moment that cruiser restricted Marcus's ability to leave, a seizure under the Fourth Amendment had occurred. A reasonable person in Marcus's position would not feel free to simply put the car in drive and pull away. Yet, no siren was activated. No traffic violation had occurred. They were simply parked, drinking coffee, existing in a space where someone else had decided they did not belong. Two car doors open and slam shut in rapid succession. The heavy crunch of tactical boots on loose gravel breaks the stillness of the night. Marcus rolls down his window, letting in the biting chill of the autumn air. The ambient sounds of the distant interstate, the low rumble of semi-trucks fade into the background as his focus narrows entirely on the two figures approaching from the darkness. On the driver's side is Officer Miller, a man in his late 40s with 15 years on the force. Miller is a seasoned veteran who operates less on the strict framework of the law and more on a jaded, unexamined intuition. Over the years, his gut instincts have slowly morphed into a quiet lascivious. He looks at Marcus, a black man in a high-end, late-model SUV parked outside a rundown convenience store near midnight, and his brain immediately constructs a narrative. He doesn't see a structural engineer winding down after a grueling shift. He sees a statistical probability. On the passenger side approaches Officer Dean, 24 years old, barely a year out of the academy. Dean is running on nervous energy and a rigid adherence to tactical checklists. He doesn't yet fully understand. His hand hovers anxiously near his utility belt. Turn the vehicle off and keep your hands where I can see them. Officer Miller says his voice is not a shout, but it carries the flat, heavy cadence of a man who is used to unquestioned compliance. It is a tone that expects resistance and is preemptively annoyed by it. Marcus remains perfectly still. His hands are at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. He takes a slow, measured breath, deliberately regulating his heart rate. Good evening, officer, Marcus says, his voice steady, carrying the resonant calm of a man who manages chaotic construction sites for a living. The vehicle is off. My hands are on the wheel. Can you tell me why we're being stopped? Miller steps closer. Leaning into the window, he doesn't answer the question. He shines a heavy tactical flashlight directly into Marcus's eyes, then sweeps the beam across the back seat, scanning for anything that could be construed as contraband, license, registration, and proof of insurance. Both of you, Elias, sitting in the passenger seat, shifts uncomfortably. He is naturally anxious, a man who over-explains when he is nervous. We just stopped for coffee. Elias says, his voice tightening, we've been at the Riverside Bridge site all day. We're just heading home. Officer Dean taps sharply on the passenger side window. I didn't ask for a story ID. Now, Marcus turns his head slightly, locking eyes with Miller. The tension in the car begins to thicken, transforming the cold air into something suffocating. Under the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution, police officers cannot simply detain citizens and demand identification without reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime is being or is about to be committed. This standard, established by the landmark Supreme Court case Terry v. Ohio, requires more than an unparticularized suspicion or a mere hunch. Officers must be able to point to specific facts. Marcus knows this. He has had to know this. It is a survival skill he learned long before he earned his engineering degree. Officer. Marcus repeats, his tone remaining polite but firm. I am happy to provide my documents, but I need to know the reason for this detention. What crime do you suspect us of committing? Miller sighs. A sharp exhalation through his nose that signals his patience is entirely artificial. Miller, a citizen questioning his authority isn't an exercise of constitutional rights. It is a red flag. It is contempt of cop. We got a call about a suspicious vehicle in the area. Miller says vaguely, now, hand over the license before I ask you to step out of the car. A suspicious vehicle call from an anonymous tipster without specific details that can be corroborated does not automatically grant police the authority to detain anyone who happens to be in the vicinity. It certainly does not provide probable cause to search a vehicle, but Miller is using the vagueness of the call as a wedge, relying on the intimidation of his badge and the blinding glare of his flashlight to bypass the legal prerequisites. Elias, desperate to defuse the situation, reaches quickly into his jacket pocket to retrieve his wallet. The movement is jerky, born of pure anxiety. His hands are trembling, and his smooth leather wallet slips from his grasp, tumbling down into the dark crevice between the passenger seat and the center console. Elias gasps and immediately dives his hand into the gap to fish it out. Hey, hands where I can see them, Officer Dean shouts from the passenger side, his voice cracking slightly with adrenaline. He unclips the retention strap on his holster. The sound, a sharp, metallic snap, echoes through the cabin of the SUV like a gunshot. Stop reaching. Stop reaching right now. It dropped my wallet. Elias stammers, freezing instantly. His hands shooting up toward the roof of the car. He is breathing fast. His chest heaving. I'm sorry. I just dropped it. The situation is now balanced on a razor's edge. This is exactly how routine encounters spiral into tragedies. The officers are viewing every movement through the lens of a potential threat. Dean has interpreted Elias's clumsy attempt to retrieve his wallet as a furtive movement, a phrase heavily utilized in police reports to justify escalations. Based on this perceived threat, Dean makes a procedural leap, step out of the car. Dean commands, pulling his flashlight back and resting his hand firmly on the grip of his sidearm. Both of you step out of the vehicle right now. Legally, under Pennsylvania v. MIMS, police officers have the authority to order the driver and passengers out of a vehicle during a lawful traffic stop for officer safety. But the foundation of this entire encounter is already legally compromised. There was no traffic violation. There was no reasonable suspicion to initiate the stop in the first place. Therefore, extending the detention and escalating it to an extraction without a valid Articulable reason is a direct violation of their Fourth Amendment rights. Furthermore, ordering them out of the car is a tactical maneuver designed to separate them, assert physical dominance, and create an opportunity to look into the vehicle for plain view evidence to manufacture probable cause. Marcus realizes the danger is no longer abstract. It is imminent. He needs to halt the momentum of the officer's assumptions before physical force is introduced. He tightens his grip on the steering wheel, anchoring himself, refusing to let the panic radiating from Elias infect him. He does not raise his voice. Head drops it an octave, speaking with a resonant, commanding authority that cuts right through the frantic energy of the younger officer. Nobody is moving. Marcus says calmly, projecting his voice so both officers can hear him clearly over the hum of the neon sign. Elias, keep your hands on the dashboard. Do not move an inch. Officer Miller. I am keeping my hands on the wheel. Miller narrows his eyes, shining the light directly into Marcus's face again. You don't give the orders here. Paul, my partner told you to step out of the car. Officer Miller. Marcus replies, his voice unwavering. He turns his head slowly to look directly at the older cop. He drops the polite deference and adopts the precise, clinical tone of an engineer dissecting a flawed blueprint. You are currently detaining us without reasonable, articulable suspicion. You have blocked my vehicle without citing a traffic violation. You are relying on a vague, suspicious vehicle call to conduct a fishing expedition. Your partner is escalating this encounter based on my passenger dropping a wallet that you specifically demanded to see. We have made no threats. We have committed no crimes. We are not stepping out of this vehicle. Miller is momentarily taken aback. People usually panic. They usually argue, yell, or comply in fearful silence. They rarely deconstruct the legal mechanics of the stop in real time. Miller's ego flares. He leans in closer, resting his forearm on the roof of the SUV, invading Marcus's personal space. I smell marijuana. Miller says flatly, it is the oldest, most overused tactical lie in modern policing. The assertion of the odor of marijuana is entirely subjective, nearly impossible to disprove in the moment, and instantly provides an officer with the probable cause needed to bypass the Fourth Amendment and search a vehicle without a warrant. It is a magic phrase designed to strip a citizen of their constitutional protections. Elias lets out a quiet sound of despair from the passenger seat. He knows they don't smoke. He knows the car smells like nothing but old coffee and the concrete dust clinging to their clothes. But he also knows that in this parking lot, in the dark, the officer's word is reality. Marcus, however, does not panic. He doesn't defensively argue that they don't smoke. He doesn't beg them to believe him. Instead, a faint, humorless smile touches the corner of his mouth. No, you don't, Marcus says simply. Excuse me. Miller bristles, his hand drifting toward his radio. You don't smell marijuana. Marcus says, his tone completely flat, devoid of emotion, because this isn't my personal vehicle. Officer, this is a specialized municipal fleet vehicle owned by the Department of Civil Engineering, and because we transport sensitive environmental testing equipment, this cabin is equipped with a continuous atmospheric logging system. Marcus slowly lifts one finger off the steering wheel and points toward a small, blinking black module mounted beneath the rearview mirror. It continuously samples the air for particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, and chemical anomalies. It timestamps and uploads the data via cellular signal to a cloud server every 60 seconds. If you claim you smell a combustible narcotic, your sworn statement will be directly contradicted by a federal-grade environmental sensor. Miller pose. He looks at the blinking black module. He looks back at Marcus. The bluff has been called, and the stakes have suddenly changed. Furthermore, Marcus continues, his voice steady, relentless in its logic. He points to a dual lens camera system mounted beside the sensor. That dash cam is recording both outward and inward. It captures high definition audio and video. It is currently streaming this entire interaction to an offsite server. So I will ask you one last time, Officer Miller, what specific articulable facts do you have to justify this detention? The silence that follows is heavy, broken only by the distant sound of a siren miles away and the sputtering hum of the Oasis sign. The dynamic of power has shifted dramatically. The officers are no longer operating in the shadows of a lonely parking lot where their narrative is the only one that survives. They are on the record. They are being documented, and the man behind the wheel knows exactly where the legal boundaries lie. Officer Dean, standing on the passenger side, looks over the roof of the car at his supervisor. The younger officer looks uncertain, the adrenaline beginning to drain from his system, replaced by a cold realization of his own legal exposure. Miller stands Riegel. The veteran cop's mind is racing, calculating the administrative nightmare that awaits him if he pushes this further without actual probable cause. He knows he has nothing. He relied on his bias, assumed he had an easy mark, and walked directly into a buzzsaw of constitutional literacy and technological accountability. Then the final twist arrives, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a quiet, damning piece of evidence broadcast over the open air. Miller's shoulder-mounted radio crackles to life. The dispatcher's voice cuts through the tension. Unit 4. Dispatch. Regarding your query on the suspicious vehicle call from 20 minutes ago, the complainant reported a silver, early 2000s model Honda Civic with a shattered taillight occupied by 3 individuals, last seen heading northbound on Route 9. Do you have eyes on that vehicle? Unit 4. The dispatcher's words hang in the freezing air. A silver Honda Civic. A shattered taillight. 3 occupants. Marcus is driving a brand new black Ford Explorer. There are 2 occupants. They look absolutely nothing like the description. Marcus turns his head and stares directly into Miller's eyes. He doesn't need to say a word. The radio transmission has just laid bare the reality of the stop. Miller didn't stop them because they matched the description. He didn't stop them because he was diligently investigating a 911 call. He stopped them because he saw 2 men he decided didn't belong in that parking lot at that hour. And he used a completely unrelated dispatch call as a flimsy pretext to harass them. The body camera footage from Miller's own chest, combined with the dispatch logs, would later show that Miller had heard the initial vehicle description perfectly well, but had actively chosen to ignore it when he saw Marcus's SUV. He had mumbled to Dean, "Let's check these 2 out. They look out of place." Completely manufacturing a reason to initiate contact. Miller's jaw clench. The color drained slightly from his face. He knows he is trapped. If he issues a ticket, it will be contested and the footage will be subpoenaed. If he arrests them, it will result in a massive civil rights lawsuit for false arrest, malicious prosecution, and a clear violation of the 4th Amendment under Title 42, Section 1983 of the United States Code. His gut instinct has utterly betrayed him. Slowly, deliberately, Miller takes a step back from the window. He lowers his flashlight. The aggressive posture dissolves into awkward, restrained defeat. "My mistake," Miller says, his voice tight. The apology entirely absent of sincerity. "Looks like we had the wrong vehicle description. You're free to go." Miller taps the roof of the SUV twice, a patronizing, dismissive gesture and gestures for Dean to stand down. The younger officer quickly holsters his weapon, his face flushed with embarrassment, and retreats to the cruiser without making eye contact. The officers get back into their patrol car. The spotlight is suddenly killed, plunging the parking lot back into the dim. Buzzing glow of the neon sign, the cruiser backs up. shifts into drive, and pulls out of the lot, disappearing into the fog without another word. Inside the SUV, Elias lets out a long, shaky breath. Slumping back against the passenger seat, he pulls his glasses off and rubs his hands over his face. Jesus, he whispers, his voice trembling. I thought he was going to pull me out. I thought he was going to shoot me over a dropped wallet. Marcus doesn't move immediately. His hands are still gripping the steering wheel. His heart, which he had so carefully controlled during the encounter, is now pounding relentlessly against his ribs. The adrenaline dump is immense and exhausting. He is safe, but he feels no victory. There is no triumph in having to meticulously negotiate your right to exist in a public space. There is only a deep, lingering exhaustion. I know. Marcus says quietly, I know. Are you okay? Elias nods slowly. Yeah. I'm okay. Let's just go home. Marcus puts the car in drive and carefully pulls out of the Oasis parking lot, the tires crunching softly over the gravel. The immediate danger has passed, but the consequences of the night are only just beginning. There is no instant dramatic justice. The real world rarely operates like a television show. The next morning, Marcus does not go to the media. He goes to his laptop. He downloads the dash cam footage, the atmospheric sensor logs, and the audio recordings. He files a meticulously documented formal complaint with the police department's internal affairs division. He submits a Freedom of Information Act request for the dispatch audio and the officer's body camera footage. The bureaucratic wheels turn agonizingly slowly. It takes weeks of stonewalling, automated email replies, and a strongly worded letter from a civil rights attorney before the department officially acknowledges the complaint. When the investigation finally commences, the evidence is insurmountable. The dashcam footage clearly shows the lack of probable cause. The dispatch logs prove Miller knowingly ignored the suspect vehicle description. The atmospheric data objectively proves Miller lied about the smell of marijuana to manufacture a search. Officer Miller is not dramatically fired in front of his peers. Instead, he faces the slow, quiet grind of administrative discipline. He is placed on paid administrative leave pending the outcome of a Garrity hearing, facing a potential perjury charge for falsifying his initial report about the marijuana odor. And realizing his credibility as a witness in future court cases is permanently destroyed. Miller quietly submits his papers for early retirement. He fades out of the department, keeping his pension, but losing his badge. Officer Dean is severely reprimanded, stripped of his street patrol duties, and remanded to an extensive, months-long retraining program focused on constitutional law and de-escalation. The department quietly settles a civil claim with Marcus out of court, desperate to keep the atmospheric sensor evidence from setting a legal precedent that could jeopardize hundreds of their previous drug arrests. The system corrects itself, but only because the citizen had the tools, the temperament, and the irrefutable evidence to force it to. Months later, Marcus sits at another traffic light late at night, the hum of the engine, a quiet companion in the dark. He watches a patrol car pass through the intersection, its taillights bleeding red into the night. He thinks about Officer Miller, a man who had spent years policing a community based on a catalog of assumptions rather than a code of laws. He thinks about how easily a life can be derailed or ended simply because someone in power decides to trust a prejudiced instinct over the objective truth. If an encounter with law enforcement requires a citizen to be a flawless legal scholar just to survive an unwarranted stop, who is truly failing to uphold the law? When authority relies on the shadows to bend the rules, the most powerful weapon a citizen can wield is the light of undeniable proof